Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a magical place for kids and grown-ups alike, where fantasy and fun come to life. And welcome to Nitpicks and Pixels. I feel like I don't even need to explain this game. After all, every Let's Player on the planet has already talked about it. But for those that haven't heard of it yet, let me fill you in on gaming's latest craze. In early August, a small indie horror game called Five Nights at Freddy's was released and became an almost overnight success. You work the night shift as a security guard at a family entertainment restaurant, complete with animatronics. Yeah, that's definitely not a reference to anything else. Here's the catch. While you're sitting in the guard room all comfy, the four animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, all roam the halls. If they find you, your life and the game are over. Opinions on the game have been massively split, some people calling it the greatest horror game in the past few years, and others finding it gets a little monotonous too quickly, which we'll get into why a little later on. Regardless of your feelings of the game as a whole, the game is very effective at evoking feelings of dread and horror within the player. But what about this game makes it so different from its competition? Well, personally, I think its greatest strength is its minimalist design, which you see throughout the different aspects of the game. Let's start by talking about some of the story, which can get pretty dark. So for the squeamish, I put an annotation below, so you'll be able to click it and skip past the story section. The story in the game isn't explained through long expository cutscenes, but rather through environmental clues and through the former guards' pre-recorded messages. Let's talk about the pre-recorded messages for a second. Listen to this one.
The characters do tend to wander a bit. They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night. Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long. They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah, it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
And that's it. Rather than going overboard, they give you just enough to get your mind racing and your heart pumping. The former guard leaves a message on pretty much every night. And while it may or may not be helpful, it definitely creates a cemented world and story that was not present at first glance. But it's the environmental elements that are the most interesting. For example, the guard mentions that if you're caught,
they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. The only parts of you that would likely see the light of day again would be your eyeballs and teeth that pop out the front of the mask.
Well, one of the animatronics, Chica, actually has two sets of teeth, which could explain that it is a former guard, or even the former guard that's leaving the messages. Another example is newspaper clippings. If you look very closely, you can actually read some of the newspapers within the game that tell you some of the more interesting aspects of the story. Now, I'm not going to spoil the whole story. It's actually a very fascinating read if you're interested in that kind of thing. But what's so interesting about the story is that it is never directly told to you. Rather, it's pieces throughout the game that the player must piece together. Though the story itself is very short and simple, it alludes to a much darker and larger narrative. This creates a natural connection with the audience to expand the story, and it's worked. From theories to fanfiction to adult content, engagement with the backstory and the overall world of Five Nights at Freddy's has been huge. But narrative is just one part of a game. It still needs complementary gameplay to make it effective. So let's take a look at that. The game is only controlled with the mouse, with no movement of the main player. It's split into two separate views, the guard room and the CCTV cameras lining the restaurant. In the guard view, you can open and close the doors and lights on either side of the room. In the camera view, you can click any available camera to view that feed. Everything takes up power, and you only have a limited amount of it, so you have to make it quick. Now, while some people find the gameplay to be lacking, I actually find it devilishly brilliant. This is for two reasons. One, for its intuitive interface, and two, for how the controls complement the horror. Now, what's nice about the simplistic controls is that they're all based around head movement. You can move your gaze left to right, you can check the cameras, you could click on the doors or the lights, but everything is designed around your head. The developers minimize the control scheme to maximize immersion for the player. The controls kind of feel like the PC equivalent of Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. Yeah, I bet you didn't think we were going to talk about that today. Brothers uses each of the two thumbsticks on a controller to move around one of two brothers, one with the left, one with the right. Now, while this might seem like a bit of a weird comparison out of nowhere, they both use the same minimalist model when it comes to their controls. One aspect I haven't really touched upon, which is very polarizing, is the waiting. And yes, there's a lot of waiting in the game, but here I think it works. Though I'll admit that waiting sometimes feels like it's padding out the gameplay, it creates a sense of horror and dread and insignificance within the player. And that's important. It highlights and accentuates the horror and dread that the player should be feeling. The designers truly understood that in order to make something truly scary, you had to take away all empowerment from the player. From Hitchcock to Lovecraft, it was never about what you did see, but rather what you couldn't see, what you couldn't control, and what your mind put in its place. Think about it. In the game, you can't move. You can't hope to escape. The animatronics, you can't even see them move from camera to camera. The only time that you see them move is when it's too late. The game makes it clear that there's no way to win, only a way to survive. Hopefully you'll be insignificant enough that they won't notice you. But who knows? And what do you get when you finally complete the game? You get the ability to control the difficulty of each of the animatronics. No congratulations, no gunning them all down in a hailfire of bullets. Just another trip to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So, why is Five Nights at Freddy so effective? Because it uses a rich yet muted backstory to allow players to expand upon and interact with the narrative. Because it uses a simplified control scheme to keep accessibility and in-game tension high. And because the game denies the player any feeling that they can overpower or complete the game. All three of these aspects contribute to making the player feel small and insignificant, which, when done right, can be one of the most powerful emotions in gaming. I'm going to put all the games I mentioned down in high roll. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. This was my original Pizza Guy hat, 'cause I'm a professional.